Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode is the Dallas Cowboys linebacker group. Specifically, we're going to be looking at analytics pertaining to the starters there. This is a very exciting year for the Dallas Cowboys. Jaylon Smith should be healthy this year. At least that's the hope, is that his recovery from his knee injury is all better. But there's just lots of potential with this Cowboys linebacker class, and I didn't actually know how good it was until you actually went down and went through each player individually in terms of, from an analytics perspective, how much improvement, or maybe not improvement, but just how focused the Cowboys have really been at the linebacker position. So I just kind of wanted to go through all the linebackers that are the starters right now, to guys that may end up be backups or more contributor guys. But we're going to go through everybody, all the linebackers, and just go through what their athleticism is, specifically explosive lower body strength, speed, and flexibility for their size. Explosive lower body strength is essentially the vertical and broad jump compared to their mass density. Speed score deals with the 40-yard dash for their size, and then flexibility deals with the short shoulder and three-cone in terms of how flexible they are for their size, in terms of ankle flexibility and hip flexibility. And that just kind of gives a good sort of barometer for the different types of athleticism that NFL players can have. And of course, we're going to look at production, specifically solo tackle market share production. Solo tackle market share, for people that aren't very familiar with that term, you take an individual defensive statistic, in this case solo tackles, and you divide it by the team total statistic, which if a linebacker had 100 solo tackles and his team had 1,000 solo tackles, and that linebacker had 10% market share. But what you do is you look at what that percentage was, and you compare it to every single linebacker since the 1996 NFL draft class, and then you're able to compare how did the special linebackers perform? You know, how did the all-pro linebackers perform? How did Ray Lewis perform in these particular metrics? Because that's how far back I went, was to Ray Lewis, to the 1996 NFL draft class. So we're going to look at sort of what the production was there, and then we're also going to look at what the production has been at the NFL level, if they actually have been contributing in the NFL. And most of the linebackers in this list have had some seasons of contribution, and just kind of look at what they've done so far and what their future may be like based on how they perform so far. But we're just going to go into 4 linebackers so far and just go through the sort of data and all the other kind of stuff. So the first linebacker I wanted to get to with the Dallas Cowboys is Anthony Hitchens. He is a linebacker they drafted from Iowa. He has been a starter. He hasn't quite had the career or amazing sort of, and some of that may just be because of Sean Lee, but he's someone that I was very surprised when I actually looked at his information on paper, his data, if you will. He was actually pretty impressive from a data perspective, just in terms of a guy who has a pretty good chance of becoming a starter, which so far he is a starter. But just to go through his data, based on his athleticism, he scored at 80.10 in terms of explosiveness for his size, at 82.69 in terms of speed for his size, and 76.49 in terms of flexibility for his size. What you should tell from the data is that he pretty much fits the profile of a potential Pro Bowl linebacker. Above average explosiveness, but not quite elite explosiveness. Above average speed, and above average flexibility, but not quite elite flexibility, but is right there. But he's just someone that, based on an athleticism standpoint, I was very surprised to see how well he tested when you actually looked at him on paper. So he was a guy that tested fairly well as an athlete. And when it comes to his college production, he scored an 83.60 solo tackle market share score, which at least hits the Pro Bowl threshold for that particular metric. And that's bottom threshold when it comes to Pro Bowlers. So most of the time, Pro Bowlers end up, at least the average for Pro Bowlers is about 88 or higher when it comes to solo tackle market share. But the bottom threshold, the bottom end threshold, is 77 or higher. So Hitchens hasn't exactly become a Pro Bowler, but based on paper, his athleticism and his production in terms of solo tackle market share fit the bill in terms of a player that could potentially be a Pro Bowl linebacker based on, you know, those two sort of major metrics. And when you actually look at his NFL market share production, which, just to explain the data here, I looked at solo tackle market share, which is MSPER is solo tackle market share, MSSPER is sack market share, MSIPER is interception market share, MSPDPER is pass deflection market share, and total impact is all those numbers combined. So just to kind of get an idea of what these market shares are doing. And when you look at Anthony Hitchens from 2016, 2015, and 2014, his 2014 season was much more impressive from a statistical perspective, like total impact. He had a 75.28 overall in 2014, his rookie year, and then he just kind of tapered off. Now, some of that's because of Sean Lee, and we'll get to Sean Lee later on, but he's been kind of an average linebacker so far in his career. Obviously, he's been a starter. He's on a team that has other guys that are kind of, you know, the thing about the linebacker position is that either you're all average or you have one guy who's a dominant guy. But the one thing I can say about him is he has performed fairly well, at least above average when it comes to certain things, like solo tackle market share. He's been really good in terms of sack market share for linebackers. You know, in 2015, he had an 83.86 overall score. And his pass deflection market share hasn't really been that great since 2014. So basically with Anthony Hitchens, in terms of future projection, it's really hard to kind of figure out what's going to happen with him. Obviously, on paper, he looks, you know, based on what he did in college, you know, his production and his athleticism all fit the markers of a Pro Bowl player, but hasn't quite turned into a Pro Bowl player yet. Some of that may be because of his age. You know, just looking at his age score, he was a relatively older prospect when he came out, so despite the fact that he has good athleticism and good production, you do need to be at least a younger prospect coming out with those markers as well to kind of hit those areas. But the bottom line is I think Hitchens is a guy who at least is shown to be a guy who can be an impact guy if he's in that type of role, but not necessarily an elite guy. And maybe some of that's because of his age, but he is someone that I think in the future he's most likely going to be a backup based on sort of what he's done so far. But he's still an exciting player to see how he develops in the future. Then, of course, we have Damien Wilson. He is a linebacker from Minnesota that they drafted a couple years ago. Based on his athleticism, he scored a 93.44 solo tackle market share. Well, not solo tackle, excuse me. Explosive lower body strength score. 62.15 speed score, and a 78.64 flexibility score. As you can tell, based on how he compares to past linebackers, the only area that he missed was a Pro Bowl speed for his size. But he has 90% all over explosiveness and 78.64 flexibility for his size. So he, in many ways, is a guy who could be a potential outlier athlete at the Pro Bowl position. Again, when you look at these thresholds, you need to look at it. You need to look at the thresholds as this is the bottom, like this is the bottom threshold for these particular metrics, and there definitely are guys who are close to that threshold that could end up still performing well. It's just you don't want guys that are woefully, you know, 20, 30 points away from the threshold. So, but the bottom line is Wilson has enough positives in terms of his athleticism that he could potentially be a Pro Bowl candidate based on his athleticism. And based on his production at the college level, he had an 85.22 solo tackle market share score at Minnesota, which hits at least the Pro Bowl threshold. It's above the Pro Bowl threshold, at least the bottom end threshold when it comes to production. Didn't quite hit All Pro, but definitely hit the Pro Bowl threshold. And in his NFL career, though, he's been mostly a backup up to this point. When you look at his production in 2015, his rookie year, did not really get to start much. You know, didn't really produce much. 2016, he definitely got some more extended time later on the year, but didn't quite have as big of an impact either. You know, based on his overall impact in terms of solo tackle market share, sack market share, interception market share, and pass deflection market share, and total impact. He's been below average in all of those things. And He is a guy that, again, a lot of people were excited about in terms of how he performed at the end of the year, and that may be an indicator that this is the year that he might become more impactful. But so far in his career, he's been below average. So I think that there's lots of positive with Damien Wilson. I think there's his athleticism traits are impressive. His production at Minnesota was impressive. He just hasn't been able to, in the last 2 years, put all that stuff together to turn himself into a very highly impactful player. But at least on paper, he has enough of the indicators that you need to consider him to be a potential breakout candidate. So we'll see what happens in the future with Wilson, but I think that there are a lot of positives to say that 2017 might be a season where he actually, breaks out in a major way. We'll still have to see what happens, but that's just one of the major positives about Wilson is that maybe what he did at the end of 2016 is an indicator of good things to come based on what he did prior in terms of upside and overall stuff like that. So again, we'll see what happens with him, but so far there are some things to be excited about for 2017. And if nothing happens in 2017, it might be time to move on. But at least there is enough stuff. Like, there's a reason why the Cowboys got him, drafted him, and are trying to develop him, is because of what he did at the college level and because of his athleticism. Then we get to Jaylon Smith, linebacker out of Notre Dame, who they drafted last year. He has not had the time, and that's actually probably be the shortest section of this whole thing. But he is someone that I'm really excited. I really want to see what happens with him because, he had the injury, which pretty much took him off the books for 2016. And also in terms of testing, he didn't really do any athleticism testing during the process because he was injured during the process. So I don't have explosiveness, speed, or dynamic speed, or at least flexibility scores for him. But what I do have is his production. At the college level, he had a 97.26 solo tackle market share score, which hits the all-pro level. It's above, the bottom end threshold for all-pro potential when it comes to Jaylon Smith. So it's evidently, it should be right there in front of you as to why Jaylon Smith was drafted by the Cowboys, because of that immense potential based on what he did at Notre Dame. If he's healthy, again, I don't know what the athleticism is. I don't know any of that kind of stuff. But based on his production, there's enough things here that he could be a guy who is an investment that might pay off big time. So I'll be very excited to see what he does this year, if he can stay healthy. And I just really want to see what he does because there's a lot of exciting things. I mean, whenever you have a guy who produces at that level, a 97.26 solo tackle market share score, that's really impressive. So I want to see what he does this year because there's a lot of impressive things in terms of his production. And the last player is an oldie but a goodie, Sean Lee. He's another guy that's had battles with injuries in his career, but has people are starting to get into him. Maybe not get into it, but they're starting to realize that he was a great linebacker prospect that just had all these injuries. So let's get into what he looks like coming out of Penn State and what he's done in the NFL, and of course, what the future might hold for him, because he is a little bit older now, but there are some positives in terms of him. When it comes to athleticism, he was an 86.45 explosive lower body strength athlete, which is really impressive. He had a 59.73 speed score and a 90.74 flexibility score. The only area of concern that you can see from this is that he didn't quite hit the Pro Bowl threshold for speed, the bottom end threshold for Pro Bowl linebackers. He didn't quite hit that. But he did have near elite explosiveness, elite flexibility for his size, and he's had a bunch of injuries. So if he was healthy, he might have set the new standard, I guess, for the bottom end threshold of Pro Bowl players. Hasn't quite done that. But what you can see is that he does have a lot of elite athleticism traits. In most analytics work, you're just looking for guys that have elite athletic traits. At least one trait that's elite. And when it comes to Sean Lee, he had almost two. He had one in flexibility and then another in explosiveness, which was really close. So there's a lot of positives to him in terms of athleticism coming out of Penn State. And then when it comes to production, he had an 88.46 solo tackle market share score, which is not all pro level, but it definitely hits the Pro Bowl threshold when it comes to that particular metric. He is exciting, from that kind of perspective, and it makes sense why the Cowboys continually had him as their top linebacker for so long, despite the injuries, and why they keep investing in him, because he's a really good linebacker coming out of Penn State. And also from his prior performances, which we'll get to. But as you can see, based on Sean Lee coming out of college, he was someone that you should have seen as a long-term starter with some Pro Bowl potential, based on at least Pro Bowl outlier potential, based on his athleticism and based on his production. So there was a lot of positives for Sean Lee coming out of Penn State on paper. And then when it comes to his NFL production, which again, just to remind you, MSPER is solo tackle market share at the NFL level. MSSPER is sack market share. MSIPER is interception market share. And MSPDPER is pass deflection market share. I know it gets confusing. And of course, total impact is total impact. It's all those things combined into one in terms of impact. So I know some of you guys are like, man, every time you do this, like it's, it gets so confusing. But just here's the basic points about Sean Lee's career. When you look at his career, he's been a fairly good, if you just look at his total impact production. In 2011, he was highly impactful. He 88.82 is an above average linebacker. That's at least a Pro Bowl potential linebacker. His 2012 season obviously had injuries. 2013, he had some injuries here and there. Was kind of recovering. Then, of course, missed all of 2014 due to injuries. 2015 was by far his best season as an NFL player with a 97.87 overall score, which is getting into Luke Kuechly territory, just to put that into perspective, in terms of total impact, And his 2016 season was not as impactful. The main reason why is that his sack market share, his interception market share, and his pass deflection market share took a steep drop. This is a linebacker that in 2015 had an 83.74 sack market share score when it came to linebackers. He had a 91.48 interception market share score in 2015. He had a 95.33 pass deflection market share score, one of the better linebackers in terms of breaking up passes on the ball. And for whatever reason in 2016, all those things dropped. I don't know 100% why that happened, but that's just what happened in terms of what his impact was on the Cowboys. So, is this a sign of him getting a little bit older and not being able to impact the passing game as much? I really don't know. He's still a very good solo tackle market share guy. He had 90+ percentile in 2016 and 2015. It's just his total impact took a big drop in 2016, based on the other sort of production markers. So, but the bottom line is Sean Lee's a great linebacker. He's always been a great linebacker. He was a great linebacker coming out of Penn State. He just had injuries that just kind of popped up on him. But I think if he's healthy this year, he'll be a very good complement to the Cowboys team as a veteran presence, because he's just a very good linebacker, and there's lots of positives to him based on paper, as I just showed you. So in conclusion, the Dallas Cowboys linebacker group, from an analytics perspective, is impressive. You have lots of young talent in Damien Wilson and Anthony Hitchens, who have at least starter level, threshold. Like they have at least starter threshold athleticism traits or above that, with above average solo tackle market share. They hit at least the areas they need to hit in terms of long-term starters to Pro Bowl players. On top of having Sean Lee, who was a really impressive player when it comes to athleticism as well, and his production at the college level, and has proven at the NFL level, especially in 2015, to be a near elite linebacker, at least for one season. And then you have Jaylon Smith, who we don't quite know what he is as an athlete, but what we do know is based on his production, he produced better than all those guys. He produced better in college then Hitchens, then Wilson, then Sean Lee, and could be even better than all those guys if he is healthy and if he does actually have some pretty impressive athleticism traits that we just don't know because of the, we just don't know because he didn't really test during that time period. But overall, I'm really excited about this Dallas Cowboys linebacker group. I think it's one of the deepest linebacker groups in the NFL. When you just look at from an analytics perspective, it's just really deep when it comes to just all the players they have in terms of production and in terms of what they have. It's still sort of potential based. I'm not gonna lie, like it's still mostly based on what they did on paper in college, and not necessarily what they've been able to do in the NFL yet. But all you really need to know is that the Cowboys on paper have a lot of potential at the linebacker position. There's a lot of potential for them to at least one season put it all together, not have so many injuries, and put together a really, really good linebacker group if they truly do take the next step this year. So I'm really excited about them, especially Jaylon Smith. I really want to see what he does this year, being as healthy as he's ever been up to this point. And I will talk to you guys in the next video. My name is James Coburn. You can find my work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Geometrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to share, like, and subscribe. That helps me out tremendously when you guys do that. Hit that like button if you want more content again. And I will talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.